לא שומעת כלום אגב. אין שידור עדיין? בינתיים לא שומעים אותי. ברגע שתדבר אני אשמע. לא. לא שומעים.
לא שמעת אותם שם?
לא. אוקיי, האוזניות האלה לא עובדות, בואו נבדוק את השניות.
שלום, בדיקת שם האנגלית.
השניות עובדות, אבל לא. זה לא עובד, זה כן עובד. ותגבירו אותו עוד. אבל תגבירו.
אצלו, משום מה.
לא, אני דווקא כן, אני חושבת שהוא ממש אחלה לגמרי, מקסים.
שלום לכולם.
אני דלוק פה.
התחלנו.
Okay.
חברים, אנחנו...
We've started. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to get started. If you could take your seats.
Please take your seats.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to this conference. Thank you to everybody who's here and everybody who's viewing us at home or from your offices. First of all, I would like to thank you for being here. And number two, I would like to apologize on behalf of General Tamir Hyman, who was supposed to be here to give us his introductory remarks, but unfortunately the war happened. And that reminds us of basically what time we're in. So I appreciate that you dedicated time to hear about something a little bit different. Although we thought about whether she really be discussing technology right now, but we can't stop our daily lives, and we know how significant technology is for us. So looking forward to Israel's strategic program on technology is an inseparable part of what's happening today. If we happen to have a siren during the conference, there is a shelter underneath us, and we have enough time, so we will leave the hall quietly and calmly. And I would like to invite Brigadier General Yitzhak Orion to say a few remarks. Good afternoon. The Center for Israel-China Policy, named for Moshe Dayan, the Glazer program, was recognized as a research program approximately a decade ago. And today, it is being supported by the Glazer Foundation, and thanks to that foundation, it has achieved the scale that it's as big as it is. If you could please raise your hands, those of you who are part of that center. Approximately half of them are here, and the rest are in reserves. And the conference that we are doing today on a national technology program in Israel, in honor of the publishing of Sobelman's memorandum, is a story of looking for donkeys and finding royalty, if you will. It's like a journey of exploration and expedition. The Glazer Center began basically with the focus on Israel-China relations, but very quickly we realized that this was occurring against the backdrop of superpower relations. One day, Ariel stepped into my office and said to me, "What's going on with the worms? We need to update the games." It's an operational game, by the way. He came to me very enthusiastically, and he said that I'm come here to write a book. I would like to write a book, and I would like to write it about standardization. So I say to him, I'm very happy, right? That standardization and standards and their role in designing the international system. So I said to him, a book, not too many people read books these days. How do you know that standardization is the big idea right now? So we'll set out and we'll figure it out as we go along. So we ultimately reached a certain junction in the area of technology. It's the focal point for superpower competition, in the competition between the U.S. and China. And so that in that triangle of the Israel-China-U.S. relations, you have U.S.-China, U.S.-Israel, and China-Israel. We all understand within that triangle, and all those involved understand that technology is key to economic power, military power, the matter of information. Everybody today is hearing about our AI, robotics, energy from renewable sources. There are those who said that data is the oil of the new age of our times, and this is the competition is over all of this, basically of getting there, maintaining the edge, achieving achievements, and preserving those achievements with this activity somewhere between research and development and its production and security. And in days like this, as we've heard from Ben, that we in Israel are in a long and tough battle, as Dayan said, with a very bloody battle, a many-day battle. It's very difficult to deal with long-term, broad-scale issues, but if we look soberly at Israel's military power, this is the result of technological achievements that were made and decisions that were made in the past. You don't have to be too creative to understand that our future and our security and our ability to survive here in this area and in this world is heavily dependent on the dependence and achievements that will be achieved today and made today that will serve us in the future. So to avoid taking too much time, because and I'm getting some hints here from my deputies, Galia. I would like to thank the Glazer Foundation that enabled us to conduct this great, wonderful activity. And I would like to thank everybody who's come, who's contributed, and who's participating in the audience. And in a little while, we'll also hear from the panelists. I'd like to thank the Institute and the Center staff for organizing the conference. And ultimately, I'd also like to thank Ariel Sobelman, the Iron Man, who, through his curiosity and his great efforts, he's brought us to where we are today. I wish everyone a very pleasant and fruitful conference. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to deviate from my what I customarily do and read from something I've written down. That's so for the good of accuracy, I'm going to speak exactly 15 minutes. So please, you can be calm about it. So, Member Knesset Kashakon, the AI board and the current deputy head of the head, Professor Manuel Trachtenberg, the director of the Institute, Major General Hyman, the head of the Glazer Center, and dear speakers, welcome everybody. Dear guests, I'm very excited and I'm very happy that you decided to come to this conference on technology and national strategy. About 4 years ago, basically for the first time, it's incredible competition between the U.S. and China in technology until it broke out as eventually it got worse and worse. And part of this chip warfare is like a fight over a hegemony and creating a new world order that will replace the current order. These two superpowers identify technology as one of the central tools for preserving or achieving information in order to achieve a military edge and international standing. So why is it chips? Of all things, we could compare those silicon components, those chips that are in every computer today, to the smallest brick of technology, or the most basic molecule of technology today. Various computer systems, smart vehicles, AI, cyber, all of these are ultimately dependent on hardware systems, on wires, basically to make them go. In other words, the chips, I believe the chips are basically the source of technology from which a huge chain of value chain derives. The most expensive chip that the humans have ever, it's much cheaper to settle Mars than to build all of the factories we have in the world. It's an incredible expense. And the barriers, the entry barriers to this market are very high. And the minimal entry ticket is about $10 billion per factory, per plant. These incredible costs made them basically the holy grail of technology, the crown jewels. And there are very few countries that have the economic power to make those major expenditures. And these countries created an exclusive club bringing geostrategic prestige to those countries. And all over the world, the connection between national security and technological standing started to solidify. That connection started to crystallize. Technology was always part of military theory and practice, but it seems like in recent years, technology has been a value in and of itself and has been set as one of the components of national security and power in Israel and in the world, as one of the designers of the world order, including in understanding the competition between the U.S. and China, but there's also, or mainly, in light of its impacts on Israel and our ability to achieve our role to be leaders and to create good research institutions for decision makers and strategists in this country. Now, what Asaf said, naturally, in many cases, we're dealing with things that are over the horizon, and strategic discourse is always in this constant tension between long-term planning and immediate needs. This is always true, and of course, and especially when it comes to wars, when there's a limited connection to a long-term strategy. Sometimes reality allows us to peer into the strategic challenges that are clear to us in real time as well. For instance, the story of the day after has been discussed for the past few months in public discourse with regard to the Israel's political and security architecture that Israel wishes to fashion. There are certain types of day after. The first is technological. One dimension is about investigation and questions regarding how successful the state of Israel is in exhausting and exploiting its technological edge in its current battlefield, both in defense and offense. Also, the use of Israel's standing with regard to the competition between the U.S. and China. For instance, where's in Israeli knowledge and innovation going, to the east or to the west? But I feel that the most important thing is creating the conditions for the success of Israel's technology in the future and ensuring our competitive abilities. This contributes significantly to our GDP, and it's about a half of our exports in Israel. And it also has the duty and privilege of creating a lot of the money to cover the cost of the war and close our deficits. In today's discussion, certain issues will illustrate how Israel will continue to compete, but how that's been eroded already today, and our standing may deteriorate even more. The foundation behind this conference is the memorandum that's behind this, the National Technology Plan in Israel. In light of what we're going through today, I'm happy to present it. It's a product of 2 years of work, including TZ, which I can't unfortunately publicize his name. This is a comprehensive study that on the development of technological competition between Israel and between China and the U.S. Some of these and other countries which have similar economic power to Israel, like Ireland or Holland. In this study, we're trying to see how leading countries compete and the policies that they employ in order to create and strengthen their technological abilities. In geopolitics, this has become part of discourse. Everybody agrees that this will impact the local industry. As you know, Israel is very important in the international chip ecosystem. Local Israeli and multinational companies operating in Israel develop many of the most advanced chips, which are many of the devices that we all use. Now, we don't even know that they were originally developed in Israel. And of course, there's Intel, the manufacturing giant that to a great extent connected its future to Israel, and it's expanding its investment. This study is trying to characterize and create policy recommendations and alternate courses of action that could become a foundation for further study, and this is also perhaps the first attempt to create a possible program for a national strategy. Now, in the background, one of the most important developments in the technological development is the American law that was passed in August 22 with incredible bipartisan support. It has a huge scale, including with about $2.8 billion, out of which incredible amounts will be given to institutes in order to bring manufacturing back home. As we deepened our investigation, we understood that the market is a watershed line and a strategic turning point where the state of Israel, the United States has decided to change this. It's a paradigm that may change how the industry has operated in the way that, unlike the way it had been doing for decades. And under the category of globalization, the story of the law of chips is tied intimately to globalization process and deglobalization that the world has been going through in recent years. And then now it's time to research and to write. And I recall a funny thing that Professor Emmanuel explained to me. A book is kind of like a birth, he explained to me. It starts with a euphoric moment of incredible bliss. There's nothing more happy, better than this. But then there's the painful childbirth. And of course, I don't know how childbirth fails on a personal level. But this is an opportunity to say thank you to a few things who have helped us reach this place. You can't do any study without any foundation. The Glazer Foundation is probably the best host that we could have asked for. And we couldn't have had this research without the cooperation between industry and academia. And this was thanks to the sabbatical that I was able to take, understanding that this discourse and a mutual that this will ultimately contribute to the state of Israel. It will be an interesting model, the combination of industry and research in Israel. Of course, the team of researchers and multidisciplinary students and thanks to the Institute, we have the wonderful connections so that we have a discourse with academia and international research institutes all over the world. In terms of this, once I ultimately understood that there was also translation, graphics, and preparation for print. And I won't thank everybody because I don't have enough time, but I want to thank everybody. And I also feel a duty here to mention my father, Rabbi Yosef Joel Sobelman, and my mother, who may she live for many years. I had them to thank for being here. It's hard, I think, to identify the absolute starting point of technology. I feel that the starting point was the 1984 economic plan. This process started with a government decision that basically changed the entire economy without detracting from the problematic economic behavior in the early 80s. There were exogenic factors that made it clear to Israel that this economic decision basically was meant to destroy local production. And this was just one government decision. The kibbutzes, the various textile factories were severely damaged, but ultimately this was meant to bring us to being the startup nation and a high-tech economy. Globalization caused a creation of long and global supply chains from bringing raw materials, minerals, and intellectual property to the east, to the manufacturing sectors that moved eastward, and from that back westward through a web of all kinds of finished products that have been distributed to the markets. In many places, this was founded on the idea of a flat Earth and the assumption that there will be less violent conflicts and there will be less obstacles to global trade. But there was also a faith developed that economic interdependence could be a balancing factor. And then COVID-19 happened, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the climate collapse, the crisis with the threat to navigation routes. These have all affected the trade routes and shipping lanes. The world has started to also understand China's real aspiration not to just be a global manufacturing plant. Of course, technology is one of the basic building blocks in China's understanding, which could ultimately become a leader in the world. And this is how ultimately we've seen this world changing before our very eyes. Ultimately, what led to industry moving to the east made the West more dependent in Asian production with very high geostrategic costs. And after going through the United States and EU, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, it looks like the world is looking for a new industrial mix between R&D and production. Now, this is an expensive thing to do. When companies are subsidized to set up plants in Israel, that's basically something that the private market can't do itself. The amount of hardware that you need, it's an incredible amount. And in order for countries to continue being competitive, Israel is no different. We're less competitive if we don't invest the necessary inputs. So finally, in this conference, we'll talk about the questions on the emerging technological issues through that they were invested in. We'll also talk about the limited reserves of manpower, and policies that will allow more parts of Israeli society to find their own place in this market. And above all, I hope that the globalization, we've seen globalization totally change, and the new trend is strengthening the connection between production and R&D. And what was changed by a government decision could and should be changed by another government decision. I wish everybody a very successful and fruitful conference. Thank you very much. Hazui. No.
So I see that Galia is quite happy that we comply with the time frames. I would like to invite to the stage Mrs. Galia Levi. She's the Deputy Director of the Glazer Center here in this institute, and the Parliament member Farkas Cohen, the former Minister of the Innovation, Dr. Noel Meitzman, the researcher of the AI in Cambridge University, and Mr. Eisenberg, he's the Director General of Aleph Foundation, is it? So can you hear me? So hello and welcome. I'm very happy to open this first panel of this conference. Alongside me there is a Parliament member, Orit Farkas-Cohen. She's the chairman of the Committee of the AI and Advanced Technologies, and the former Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, which is extremely relevant for this conference. And alongside you there is Dr. Yara Wilsman. She is a researcher of artificial intelligence from the Center of Digital Innovation in Cambridge University. Mr. Michael Eisenberg, he is the Venture Capital Foundation Aleph member, and he wrote a book, The Tree of Life and Money. So we did talk about that many times already. So this panel will be focused on high tech, and we did talk about the importance of high tech for the day after. But Israeli high tech is in some kind of quite complicated corner at that point, exposed to different challenges recently because of the judiciary overhaul that created a little bit of a havoc, I must say, and built some, and the 7th of October, obviously. So we're a little bit on quite a junction, I would say. In addition, obviously, as Ariel mentioned, the superpowers that's a battling a global, obviously, battle doesn't contribute to this particular topic. And Ariel would like to quote you. Allow me to quote from the memo. Ariel writes: "The human capital, Israeli human capital, did responsible for the unprecedented breakthroughs, but we're in the midst of the concerning change of tendency." And I would like to start this panel with Yaram. Allow me to ask you what Israel is not doing right. Where is our problem? It's a very short answer, I guess. So yeah. So first of all, hello, all of you. I will start with the very fact that the reason we are here, all of us, we know that Israeli high tech is extremely important for Israeli economy, and in fact, that's what actually holds together Israeli economy. In 2022, the high tech, in fact, the whole field of high tech was 18.1% of the GDP of Israel. So there is tremendous importance to the GDP, and Israeli economy is dependent on high tech. And the tendencies and trends that you mentioned were still impacted by COVID. There are so many different global processes that influence our current condition that do create this negative impact upon the current stage of high tech in Israel, but we're still impacted by COVID. All the processes that began in COVID still influence us in this sense. The investors from outside prefer to invest elsewhere in the safer places at that period of time. So there was a global high tech crisis that didn't happen just in Israel. In addition, obviously, there were additional ramifications that you mentioned. Some of them you didn't. I will not review all the processes, of course, but we can spend hours talking about that. But of course, now we are in the process, in the midst of war. It's a very challenges crisis, of course, which also influences the aspect of investments, the foreign investments into Israel. You did mention a little bit the tip of the iceberg indeed, but we're well aware of the fact that majority of the investments are in fact foreign investments, foreign investors that are not as happy to invest into an economy in the midst of warfare and the higher risk, uncertainty, and etc. In addition to this aspect and this process that we're currently facing today. And it's important, of course, in this context to mention the governmental investment into Israeli companies and into high tech in Israel. In fact, we do more than 50% arrive from the foreign investors. So Israeli economy dependent upon the foreign investors. That from one hand, it's lovely. Of course, the state of Israel is a very attractive country in this sense. We do see this entrepreneurial spirit and innovation and the audacity, especially during those days, in fact, of the war. So in this aspect, of course, we can see that there is quite an outburst of innovation during this crisis of warfare. But in addition, I do think this is, in fact, part of the matter, the dependency of the foreign investors on this aspect of the state of Israel. In fact, investing in significant amount into R&D if you compare it to other OECD countries. So there is also an important aspect of governmental investment that is underinvested, and another process we'll be definitely discussing today is the AI, artificial intelligence. The consumers in the world are hungry for AI, the private users and companies as well. And Israel, well, it's very strong in certain traditional fields, which is fintech and cyber, and various corporate software. But I think there is exactly the place for us to start to invest into strategy and policy, to invest into AI, to expand our investment, the governmental investment into artificial intelligence. Obviously, I'm well familiar with the national program of AI, which is, of course, quite an achievement for the state of Israel. Almost all the countries in the world indeed did generate a national program of artificial intelligence. But here it was, I would say, slightly too late, and the scope of the investment into AI is insufficient indeed. That's true. If I understand you correctly, it's money. Since we're a small country, we can't really cope with those tremendous budgets that other countries invest. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Why can't we actually say that, yeah, well, that's what we can do. Let's just, settle down for that. So it won't be on top of the summit of global technology. Well, AI is an actual revolution. We cannot allow ourselves to stay behind. It's like an internet revolution, just to compare. And for this particular aspect, indeed, there's no reason for us to stay behind. In fact, well, we have to talk about the human capital. I don't like the term human capital. I would love to call it innovation and creativity and Israeli spirit of innovation. We see that during war, and we see so many different projects that are popping up. And if we will not get into the game, it's a high risk for us than not. Again, I'm not even talking about the regulation and other aspects, but I talk about the being part of the game of AI on a global level. What will happen to us if we will not jump on this wagon of AI? There are always abuse of AI, so many positive aspects in this field. Of course, efficiency, streamlining of work processes, increase of the level of the quality of outputs when we use AI. But obviously, if we will not benefit from it, will not arrange some kind of strategic plan for a long term, then we might be experiencing an abuse of AI. All the risks we're all familiar with already at that point will be a violation of ethical rules, for example, privacy breach, and other risks of that sort in the field. But again, when we talk about here in the context of this particular panel, so there are other problems, in fact, corporations, for example. The moment we are not part of the game of AI and we don't generate a strategic plan, there is a certain risk we won't be able to create corporations with the other players in the world that are already quite advanced when it comes to regulation arrangements and a program on a national level in this field, and then we won't be able to cooperate on a more efficient and beneficial level. And we can't really avoid conflicts with other countries. So obviously, the attempt that the companies will have to invest in order to cooperate with others will be tremendous. It will be actually a redundancy indeed. We do have a national program, but it's yet not aligned with the other plans, for example, European ones. So then companies that are working here in Israel will have to, in fact, forced indeed to create some kind of alignment and amendments of the program that exists here towards in order to fit the non-Israeli national programs. And this is a redundant effort and this whole miss of being part of this race after the AI, and we have to be there. So thank you. I would like to address you, Orit. You are the Minister of Innovation and Technology, and today you're the chairman of the Artificial Intelligence Committee in the Knesset. So you do know what the government is doing in this field. I guess you're very knowledgeable in that. I would like to ask you, what are the challenges that you see on a governmental level when it comes to promotion of high tech? So again, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I was a minister for a short period of time in Bennett's and Lapid government, and I think that pretty quickly it was clear, and really 2021 was the culmination of the development of high tech for many actual aspects, and I think that we did manage to survive COVID period with quite leading economical parameters. So yeah, now it is switched on. Well, I think because of Israeli high tech that paid threefold more taxes to the state, there were recruitments around IP. The vision was, in fact, to bring Israeli companies that will be here and to raise this growth of industry more and more. As a minister, when I started my term, and to this, I started to work in this field, I saw that the challenges are very clear again, and some of them actually indeed you just touched upon. And if I can give a little bit of titles, it's in infrastructure. There's social gaps, of course, and there's a diversity. And indeed, obviously, that would be international aspects. And this conference, for example, is addressing it. When I talk about the infrastructure, again, we do talk about the fact that in the state of Israel, when we look at various semiconductors, or for example, we talk about the supercomputers that are required for the needs of the development of the AI, or the language that wasn't developed. The Hebrew language is not adjusted to the AI enough. And we did start to ignite different processes that some of them were not expanded enough. They were not of large scale, and some of them were way too slow. Another topic that I think really stood out was the human capital. When it comes to the human resource, we can see so many social gaps, but also the matters of Israel as an ecosystem for international talents. In two of those fields, we did invest a lot of effort. I actually created the committee headed by Daddy Perlmutter. It was a committee dedicated to the human capital that did emerge and became a resolution of the government that's called the National Plan of Human Resources in the State of Israel, with goals and objectives. Because what we did see, and you're all familiar with those figures, that in order for not all the children have the same opportunities in the State of Israel and the world of and realms of technology. It's quite dependent where did you grow up. Is it a peripheral area and you're not from the center of Tel Aviv? Your ability to actually to being targeted and then to find your way in those realms is very low. And this is where we did create a national plan. We did ignite it and created a program called the High Tech Class together with the Ministry of Education, which was a very aspirational program. Within 5 years, the built-in mandatory curriculum from the kindergarten until the 8th grade children will study technology. It was quite a challenge, really. When it comes to searching for teachers, we really worked on that in the teachers' union agreement, so the high-tech people can actually come and teach. We need the consent of the teachers and different centers that we created of physics in the peripheral area. And we did highlight the various targets of policy that we issued for the Authority of Innovation, Integration of Arabs and Women. Yeah, that's where we worked. And we have to say the truth. In the academic world, there is also a problem when it comes to artificial intelligence. The human resources are not diverse enough. If you read Ariel's work and you see the Chinese 5 years annual plan that subsidized academics and various expertise and specialties in the fields they found fit, that's what we started to build. And truthfully, I have to say the new government and the judicial overhaul and the war stopped many of those projects and those tendencies. And the third topic that I touched upon, that diversity as well. As had been said already before, the Israeli industry is very diverse in very certain areas when it comes to the clean tech. For example, energy, this is not our forte. And we try to ignite different projects that will diversify the focus of Israeli high-tech industry. But here I think the emphasis should be on strategy. And this is the main difficulty of the long-term policy. And when I look around and I look at the current budget and I see that they cut off all the investments into education, which human capital is the foundations of all. And I see the national plan of AI that myself and the Minister of Treasury then, Yvette Limerman, they cut it off in half, in fact. And there's no attention even or intent to supervise and to actually implement it. And when indeed really you can see that so many things that are actually stopped. And yeah, that's true, and we'll be probably talking about that representative of the Innovation Authority. There is a foundation that is helping startups. I don't understand why they actually emphasize only institutionals. But yeah, a certain backup given to the startups. Okay, I have no doubt, in fact, that no one is emphasizing enough high tech as an engine, and not just an engine, but also something that has a strategic security importance for the State of Israel on the level of, we don't always really understand that, but we should. And in this aspect, I do not think that we don't have enough money really when it comes to that, when it comes to security. I think there is a disruption in priorities of this government, a significant disruption. They found so much money for other things that are less value generating than continuation of reinforcement of high tech during those difficult days. And if I can just wrap it up, I think what really clearly seen right now, to what extent I will talk about that as well during the second round, because as the Minister of Technology, it was really clear to me that the American pressure upon China and etc. We did some things on this topic as well, by the way. But yeah, we must invest into infrastructure in Israel. You know very well that I started to work on the regulation. We joined the GPAC as when I was a Minister of Innovation, and I issued a draft of regulation. And only recently, in fact, they started to promote it in the government. But I do think as well, really, what I would like to see, in fact, I want to see more attention in more different fields. In this current budget, when it comes to high tech, because in the end of the day, Israel needs to rebuild its reputation as the superpower in technology. I think the judicial overhaul and war created here tremendous damage when it comes to level of certainty, and the event themselves really didn't very help everything that happened. Where was this whole technology when it happened? Yeah, we need to rebuild our reputation. I just want to ask you a short question. Michael is already would like to jump in. I can see that. No. We did talk about that, and Ariel mentioned that as well. Not in your case, unfortunately, we didn't hear his comment. But the Americans that aspire towards the free market did decide recently to drop it slightly, and put it aside without involvement, and to build a model of supervision, or more supervision, at least in this field of high tech. What do you think about this model of governmental supervision that is tighter in this field? Actually, if I can take it into my experience, one of the things that we did see, for example, because of different programs such as Horizon, there is an increasing impact of the European market upon our research, and we're weakening our ability to enjoy the infrastructure that exists in the United States that is tremendously expanded for our researchers. And this is because of the lack of satisfaction that was very prominent and very public between the governments, really, when the United States really expressed their discontent with the very fact that Israel is not supervising our technologies in this conflict with China. And we did introduce changes in the former government that I was part of. If you remember, there was a declaration of Jerusalem when Biden arrived to Israel. That is a part of it. It will include, and it didn't happen by chance. It was a result of a lot of work invested, that United States will increase the level of cooperation with Israel. But there was a but, and the but was that we actually went to Washington a number of times, and we ignited a work of two groups between the National Council of Security in Israel to work on trusted technologies and our policy together with the United States. We were also required to return and to re-examine our policy on the foreign investments into Israel. And yeah, they talk about the Haifa port and Tnuva. But when it comes to technology, it's even more sensitive if it comes. Well, it's definitely as sensitive as the Haifa port and the Tnuva. And there was work began that started there, but know that it didn't really move forward with the proper pace that is required at that point. But we have to say that this is a real deal. And I think, at least myself, I did learn one thing or two during this war. Israel needs to understand that when it comes to this matter, we need to be at the side of the Americans, at the American side, and we need to do what we have to do on this topic, so we can allow ourselves to actually benefit in the future. This amazing playground that exists in America as players that will have a full approach when it comes to those matters. So, Michael, you were so patient up to that point, but now it's your turn. Let's talk a little bit about the power between the superpowers. Two great superpowers investing capitals into this battle. Tremendously large capitals, scientists, and etc. How Israel can find its own place in this competition between the superpower field of technology to benefit from it somehow? What do you think?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. And my two colleagues too, I also want to thank them. To this panel here. I think that we need to zoom out here. I think a bit differently from Yara with regard to the artificial intelligence being like, no, I think it's more like nuclear. There are nuclear countries and there are non-nuclear states. There are AI states and there are states without AI. I think that this is the more correct conceptualization of artificial intelligence. Now, AI, even if it's extremely powerful, and even if it sets different economies apart from each other, it will also set apart the different alliances. So there's the Western Alliance. I don't think it's really a Western Alliance, but there's one alliance that we call it the Western Alliance. There will be the North Korean. China, Russia, Iran, and the others, and that alliance too. In 2007, you wrote an article on why the State of Israel needs a CFIUS in order to prevent proliferation of technology from here to China, including ports and all kinds of other things. We, as a country, we weren't there in those two places. We didn't understand, and we weren't intelligent enough to understand that those friends, the alliance regarding the U.S. alliance, and we also didn't really understand. We didn't realize that the AI race, just like is intricately tied to our textile family in Dimona. It's the same thing. It's tied to the idea that this is an investment. It's not an expense, it's an investment. It's an investment in our security, in our economy, and in our future, in our diplomatic future, and in our economic future. The first speaker said, to survive her. If we want to flourish here, we really need to invest in this issue. Now, we have advantages. In other words, the State of Israel is one of the only places in the world where they do semiconductor design at a very high level. And if anybody looks here at Intel or Apple or NVIDIA, there is a very high level of semiconductor design here. There's also production infrastructure, which is a great start. But we here, and here I diverge from Michael, we're talking about infrastructure. It's like roads and trains and things like that, and ports and things like that. This is an infrastructure for growth for the future of Israel in the West. And if we want to be a flourishing part of this alliance, we absolutely must invest dramatically in this. Just like we think of nuclear and intersections and interchanges and trains. The United States, this is part of the understanding that we're being divided from, we were once a global world, but now we're a world of alliances. And this will affect supply chains, global supply chains, and will affect our future. I'll reveal here, and I don't know if I'm supposed to do this here, but 2 years ago, when the head of I went to the head of the National Security Council. I don't know if we had already known each other back then or if we talked about it. And I say to him, you have to set up a plant that's not just Intel, but also a collaboration with another institute. I mentioned TSMC at that time, and it didn't go anywhere. This is the problem. There is there's no attention, and it's not just this government. It's not just an industry that's 18% of our economy. No, this is the State of Israel's strategic edge in terms of infrastructure. And until we understand this, unlike Orit, I feel like most of the ministers know how to run their WhatsApps, but when you start talking to them about AI and semiconductors, it's like speaking to them in Chinese. And this is a problem. Yisrael Shai was here. Minister Yishai was here, but it should be the finance minister. It should be a prime minister's program. Or the minister of defense. This is our major event here, and this is really our place in the future of the world. We'll never 100 million people. Let's hope to reach 20 million in another decade and a half, but we won't be 100 million people. We have to compete over the infrastructure, the intelligence, and the deep understanding. We need a conceptualization that should outstep these other people. And just to relate to what Orit said a few moments ago, it's not just this budget, and I think that what they do with the $1.5 billion shekels and the individual authority isn't in the right direction, particularly when it comes to what we're talking about now. We have a half trillion shekel budget. And that's already a number. We have that number. The problem is that it's not clear how we divide that up. Instead of going back to 1948 and saying, let's start from scratch. What are the needs? What are our targets in the State of Israel? What kind of state do we want? What kind of AI do we have to create fundamentally? What do we want to achieve here? We always say, we have to cut 0.5% from here, from there, or $1 billion shekels here or that. That's not a way of operating in 2024. You can't speak like that in 2024. You have to start to invest once more in Israel's competitive edge. So you're saying that half a trillion shekel won't be enough? Of course it is enough. And here I also diverge a bit from Yara here too. I don't think the dependence on foreign investments. Look, since the war broke out, $150 million were invested in Aleph. In the next round, this 150. There's a lot of money flowing in here, and we can leverage this through public partnerships. And if we're going to institutions that have a lot of money to invest in that, just like they can buy data center bonds and fiber optics bonds and building chip factories. There's plenty of money for this, and you need to start to invest that money. Mass is a lot of money. It's possible, and that will give a future to this economy. Look, we have time for a very short round. Everybody will get 1 minute. I'll start with you, Yara. If you're the counselor, the advisor to the government that will be established now, or are there elections coming up? I've already set up a government. Theoretically, I just advise the first thing that you say to do.
So first of all, I think when it comes to strategy, to create a strategy where they take into account all the deepest aspects when we talk about artificial intelligence, we need to obviously look for inspiration in the European Union, high-risk technologies that actually should not be part, such as, for example, emotion recognition through the photo of a person, in-depth strategy, not for here and now, but for the aspect of development of technology in the future. And to create some kind of scenarios of uncertainty, not just that AI working in routine. What happens when it doesn't really work? What happens when there's some kind of dramatic change or a crisis? That's one thing. Secondly, and again, really you mentioned it here, in this aspect, the literacy, AI literacy, which is also an important aspect. We do have powerful technologies. AI is a tremendously powerful technology when it comes to streamlining and efficiency and the increase of level of quality when it comes to the output. But what we still do not have is this education of how to use AI in a beneficial, wise and transparent and damaging manner, and the concepts or the gaps that we talk about different groups of population. AI has this power of actually closing those gaps, but it will not highlight the literacy in the field of AI, of how to use it properly, and the regulation and all the different arrangements. For example, AI in schools and in other institutions of that sort. We will not benefit from the power of AI to limit the gaps, and it will create actually the other expansion of the inequality that is existing right now. And the opening of data, governmental data of the ministries to facilitate and allow the researchers and to the companies to use data. This is a significant and dramatic aspect. And in this context, allocation of research and the researchers that will not go outside to other countries but will stay here, allocation of budgets for research. That's true. Michael, can you characterize the technologies, the future technologies in your eyes that Israel has to focus upon?
Okay, before I do that, I would like to comment on what Yara said. I agree with the last things that she said, but I think very differently with regard to drawing closer to what the Europeans are doing. Look at where the next best thing in technology is coming in. It's most 70% is coming to the United States, not Europe. It's the entrepreneurial spirit, and what the Europeans do is only setting their status as when you limit AI, they think that they're living in some kind of an island. There are Chinese, there are Americans. The world is going forward. We can't do this to ourselves. We must accelerate and not think too much about it. We do have to ask the question of what are the special Israeli values that we're inserting into this. And I think that just like you have, and I said this several times in the past, you have like the purity of arms doctrine in the military. You need a unique Israeli doctrine for this as well. So when you ask me what the technologies are, the basic technologies are basically combining AI with what's called physical sciences, physics, technology, and chemistry that can create incredible things here, whether it's synthetic biology. And there, the country needs to invest in a lot of money in the infrastructure, not in the companies. increase, but in the infrastructure, and AI and energy. And I'll say one more thing. We are getting a bit set on Elbit, Rafael, and Elta and the Israel aircraft industries. We have to build a new agile military industry, and our foundation is investing in it. This is giving us something new in our current budget, but this requires massive investments in infrastructure that need to be advanced. And in general, generally speaking, we need to depart. We have to come out of this as a small country. We could have done lots of things here. It's not just about keeping scientists here. We can really draw scientists to Israel. We can really draw them here. We have to work on that. We have to set objectives. We have to be measurable. And we have to, when the government's failed, we have to be able to say, we failed. This was the objective, and this is what we're heading for. And the public, people go on to the next item on the agenda when the objectives aren't met. Most of those objectives weren't met because people were dismissed. Some of this can be about budgets, but you can also have a digitization that can be measured. That's measurable, and that's how you can open up more budgets for future investments.
So after I already created the government, now I'm appointing a next minister. But we don't need actually the Minister of Innovation should be Minister of Finance. Okay, the most important minister in this field, what would you do as a minister in the new government, theoretical government we have? Look, I think that we all understand that there's a lot of things that need to be amended. There's so many things that we have to fix. We are currently experiencing a war and military challenges and security strategic ones. Now we have more than 140,000 inhabitants that are evacuated from their own homes and settled in the north. I think, as Michael mentioned right now, first of all, as far as I'm concerned, the government will have to change completely their priorities, absolutely the order of priorities. As the last budget really was completely disrupted if it comes to priorities. They didn't take money and put all of it into war or into the home front or evacuate it. They didn't emphasize the north. It's all the resurrection in the south, which is very important. But there is an event in the north that is actually quite dramatic. People that don't even know how will it unfold, how will it evolve, and there is no attention paid to the north. And we need to build the whole ministry based on where we want to go. But I think that we'll have a lot of work of rehabilitation, actually, of rebuilding infrastructure. Look at this budget that has been ratified right now. They cut high tech. They want to cut the budgets of the chief scientists. The chief scientist, for example, the Minister of Energy. This is such a vital matter dedicated to the field. No, this is not a substitute to the general fund of the Authority of Innovation. No. But we'll have to build the budgets, I think, at least of all the ministries. And also pay attention that in the current budget, according to the understanding, they just wanted to tighten the belt, on coalition money. We do talk about high tech, but we have to remember that the government increased actually the actual incentives of not to study core studies, STEM studies in Israel. I think it exceeds the topic of our gathering here. But the state of Israel won't be able to exist economically using the current economical model of inequality of the burden when we talk about the prolonging the military service, rising the age of exempt from the reservist service, and the dramatic the security budget will be increased dramatically for a long term. You won't be able to succeed and to go through this event. Only one part of the people paying taxes, and some are moving into very opposite direction of working or paying taxes. And another matter, it doesn't exist in the budget, by the way. The budgetary department, they say, no, this is not the time to do that. I disagree with them, by the way. They say that there is absolutely no any engines of growth. Michael just mentioned that, and rightfully so, that infrastructure he mentioned. But there are other different projects of infrastructure that could have been a growth engines, and many of them don't require actually governmental budget when you have tenders, such as, for example, for highways or in energy. And maybe in the topic that you mentioned as well, you build a model. Entrepreneurs will be living from the outputs, different models that exist that are really pays off for all the parties, and this is missing completely from the budget. And we need to tell the truth. I had a discussion, the budgetary department thought that we just need to tighten the belt and that's it. Yeah, so briefly speaking, you're not optimistic at that point. Thank you so much. We need to see this difficulty as an opportunity. We don't have a choice. We need to fix things. So let's summarize this panel, and thank you all, guys. So will they hear me at home as well? For the second panel, I would like to invite Dr. Palatege, Director of the Advanced Technologies here, Dov Moran as the co-partner of Global Venture, the Chachishner, the head of the Technological Division in the Authority of Innovation, and the laureate of the event, Dr. Ariel Sobelman.
We can't hear her yet. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for remaining with us.
So it's really beautiful and lovely and wonderful that you managed. I would like to start with a quote, because I won't even say who am I quoting, but I will be quoting. And again, let's see if you will guess who was the one who wrote it. So the scientific research requires not just for the needs of security. All of our actions in culture and economy will not be described without maximum use and including with the achievements of science and technology, development of the land, maritime routes, health and education, require nurturing of the science until last ability. And it's definitely the same for the need of security, ability to stand at the gate if days will come. We need to coordinate the best of scientific brains of the Jewish people and to allow our talented youth to integrate themselves and dedicate their life to the research. We'll create most advanced laboratories in physiology and biology, and we'll be building the development of the state and its security. So who did say that? Do you know? Yes, truthful, true that. As I said, okay, you know what, I will open it with a quote, but politicians do talk a lot, and Ben-Gurion was a politician, but he also did. He did put the money on the table for what he actually said, and what we really had here, and quite modest abilities, we did send the youth to learn technology and science, understanding we don't have anything else during even the austerity period. And the question is, well, are we too drunk with us being startup nation? Did we lose what we had to invest? And I would be immediately addressing with few questions. I'm very happy that I can host here on this stage again Mr. Dov Moran. He is the co-founder of Co-Ventures, Mr. Chachishner as the Deputy Director of the Innovation Authority, and Dr. Ariel Sobelman, a leading researcher in our center. And today we'll be talking about this wonderful research that's been launched in Hebrew and in English National Technology Plan in Israel. Ariel Sobelman. Yeah, you can take it with you, of course, obviously. So we have only 30 minutes. I'm coming from the reservist service, so we are very strict on time. So in the end, what we'll do actually will be asking you questions, then we'll have the same question asked to all. And you will not receive a fun question as Gal gave you, creating the government and etc. And now you can have all the fun. No, it will be a harsh question, so get ready, really. So the previous panel was dedicated mostly to the foreign investments in AI and the risk that will not be part of the global game, what the state did do or can do in order to address technological challenges, supervision of the government upon high tech, and lack of the attention of the government toward this field that is strategic advantage of Israel, in fact. And how can we embed the special values of Israel into our high-tech industry? And I will open with you, Mr. Dov Moran, with the first question. You managed very much with technological fields of significance. You promoted topics without governmental involvement. Why shouldn't we carry on like that as well?
Okay, yes. Okay.
Okay.
I've succeeded a lot, but I've failed much more. There's no failing or succeeding for us. Okay, anybody who tries fails, so I feel fine with my failures. I remember that, by the way, the world has changed. There's the world up until the 7th of October and the world after the 7th of October. And with the distant past before the 7th of October, I was asked, thanks to why is Israel succeeding, and how, what is the Israeli government have to do it? The government didn't do anything. I said it's great. The non-intervention is great. It's wonderful, and wouldn't it be great if we continue that way? I don't think the government needs to be too involved. By the way, I don't accept, I don't accept the idea of AI countries and non-AI countries. No, it has to be everybody, not just in your cars or in your minds. Muli's right. Yeah, there's that kind of a thing, there's that AI chip. And for some people, it will kind of compensate for what they're missing. So quantum computers is something different. That's really the business of states because of the needs, and some of them are national needs, which we won't expand on here. For those who don't have that, will have a security problem, a major security problem. AI is for everybody, just like a telephone. There is, and by the way, I'm one of the reasons for this. But here, everybody has a telephone. Nobody feels like, they don't. There's a problem that they're not manufacturing or developing phones here. No, it's not it's such a horrible thing. Look, do us a favor. Create a country for us it's a good place to live in. Now, I've come back from abroad. I met three families. These are families, not people, not individuals, who left the country, including one, a wife and husband, and everybody knows her name, who 2 months ago took her husband and her 2 children. She sold her house in Zichron Yaakov. For those of you who know, she sold her vehicles. She transferred her life to a different country, to a very smart person, regardless of what she did. And this is not a rare thing. And it's because this country has kind of gotten ruined. It got ruined in the 7th of October and before that as well. And I'm not going to go into the argument of who's responsible, who isn't responsible. We're experiencing the experience of a bad country now in electronics and radio. There's, when you have AM and FM, you have the subject wave. If that's not working, then if it doesn't work, then the music waves won't work either. We're now there's so much such a lack of security and lack of confidence and totally horrible government. And this government is completely screwed up. It doesn't look at what we really need, and it totally ignores the hostages, which is incredible. It's absolutely heartrending. It's heartrending. And for me, this is a crisis in my relations with the country. And I think that what we need to do here is to fix this. Therefore, I think that this entire discussion regarding how the government can help high-tech, with all due respect to the minister here, hopefully she'll also be a minister in the future. Guys, this is the most essential problem that we need to work on. And all the rest is decorations, is less important. Yes, the government, of course. I think that the government brought the country to this terrible situation. Ariel, please give him his microphone back. And this is really you said things here that are very poignant regarding the overall environment, and I completely accept, and on a personal level I agree with you. But if we were to really tie this to the subject of this discussion, the technology itself, let's say that we now go through that process, which is very important, as you said, because we're experiencing for a long time, even from before the 7th of October, when you have this environment that's gone bad, what that means. But in this discussion, where do you think the government really needs to come and intervene in order to push us forward? If you could even mention a name, a technology, a discipline, or something that you think, look, the government decisions have a certain weight, and I don't think that a government is It's not a totally transparent guarantee. There's an example of how a government created an incredible change, which was in 1992. It was an initiative, a government decision that cost nothing. Nothing. It was incredible how little it cost us. That made a major change that basically brought to a situation where we became the startup nation. It was a discussion on the support for venture capital funds. Now there's money and activity, and all this expanded and grew. And it's not a decision that required 500 million shekels or $500 million. And it required, first of all, you need to love the country to understand what's really needed, and a statement saying, let's set up entrepreneurship and high tech and place the emphasis on those things. So I think that the state, as a good state, needs a government that would say, listen, what we emphasize here, beyond handling this crisis, and it will be a horrible cost. I don't know how much money will be left after we pay for it. We need a government to say, here are our priorities. This is what we want to be. We want to be a country that is a light to the nations, a high-tech nation, a state that has advances, technology, science, development, or don't we? And if we say that, and if we say that that's where we're headed, I think that the money that will come, and how that money will come is okay. That's not such an issue. Things will work out. It will work. There are plenty of good people. There are incredible people here in this room, much better people than myself, who will help and who will produce. So I think that, to tell you what exactly it is, who am I to say, Okay, absolutely. So you're talking about an overall environment and how people relate to this in general. And I want to ask a question to Ariel, who has really deeply studied this question in the past 2 years. Let's take an example. Let's see, who do we want to resemble in terms of how to do these things a little bit better? Can you give us some sort of something to compare ourselves with? Yes, thank you. So first of all, Wolfu was my boss for a long time, and almost anybody who was my boss is in this room right now. That's a real something that I really benefit from, and I learned a lot from him about persistence, about working in difficult conditions, and if you ultimately, if you dig a tunnel, you'll find your way out of the tough situation. That's true for technology, and it's true for policy too. Now, I don't want to resemble anybody else. That's not what I'm looking for in life. I think that the Israeli model is an incredible model that was created. It was created really from the grassroots in many aspects, and it was right for a certain period of time. It was right for the time of when it was a state on the go. It was up until a certain point, it was right, the right thing to do. When you have to scale up, I think that it's difficult to continue with the model of things just working on their own. That's very difficult. That's good up until a certain level. But if we go into the discussion regarding the need for infrastructure, and I agree with Michael that resembles a lot more, resembles a road more than anything else. And it's also education. That's also infrastructure. There's a sentence in the United States, that they say that everybody says that there's some sort of a teacher to thank. That tax, this is basically a tax for the teacher that taught him how to build things. It's like the car that took that person to work in the morning. The state needs to be there for those heavy issues, those types of things. It's not something that the private market can do on its own. They're so far down along that infrastructure is always the state that needs to do the infrastructure. In that sense, I would like, if we need to resemble anyone, it would be to those countries that have already correctly identified what's happening in the world and the changes and the trends. Once we were indifferent to the question of where products are coming from. We didn't care. We would be used to going to the store, and we'd always find what we were looking for there. We never asked what country those things came from. Today, in this state, when globalization has changed, that doesn't exist anymore. So those countries that correctly identified and on time and decided that they need to create a national strategy to deal with this are the countries that Israel needs to resemble. And we have to internalize that we must. With regard to infrastructure, I don't see an alternative to government investment. And we see that other countries have reached the same conclusions. They invest those inputs. Israel, I feel, is lagging because it hasn't done it yet. Okay.
when I'm looking at the details, when you talk about infrastructure, it's such an expanded term, really. So we need to zoom in into depth, and we need to understand what it means. There is an involvement of so many different governmental ministries, in fact, and very many different disciplines. So it's a lot of significant attempt, and you talk about the significant difficulties we experience. How can we even compete with those giants? When we look at the world of chips, for example, how can we compete with those giants that already exist and already ahead of us, and they did what one has to do in order to build infrastructure? Again, chips is not just the chip itself. At the top of the pyramid, there are the chips, but below there is a whole chain of value of different matters aside. You have the packaging factories, testing equipment. All of those matters, as again, I can quote Gideon Benson, my boss, it's maybe not NASA rocket science, but it's also not a sweatshop. There are populations in Israel that do not have a niche in the current economy. You don't have this. You either have someone on Rothschild there, working in those firms in the startup, or you are some kind of, taking as a service provider. But if we'll be able to build and expand a little bit the niche, this industrial base of the states that will create jobs in other fields, lateral, not just a vertical growth, but a lateral growth as well. I think it will open so many different opportunities. I don't want to steal Czechia's agenda. I know that in the Innovation Authority, they work in that. They do work in the development of human resources of the future and how to expand the industrial base. That's why we need to be. So really, let's move to you, Czechi. And those of you in this panel, you don't just represent the state, you represent the entity that is training and incentivizing technology and innovation. What kind of tools you as an authority of innovation have in order to aid and help on the bigger topics that were presented here? So just a moment before I'll delve into the tools, I would like to present to you the angle, a certain angle that really relates to this particular place where we are at INSS. I want to talk about two layers. There is the macroeconomical tier, and there is also the tier of national security. And I'm saying national security, I don't mean just the security or defense, but also in senses of health, national health, nutrition security, and everything that has to do with different aspects of national security of the nation. So in fact, there are two tiers, the two levers that we really separated for many years. They were parallel and never cross-referenced. I think those years bring us to the interface point, and that will bring me to the strategy and the tools that we develop. So let's talk a little bit about the economy and macroeconomy. We did mention high-tech numbers, more than 50% of the export, more than 35% of the tax revenue. But what happened to the high-tech recent years? What kind of challenges do they face? Our startup nation, 13 years before opened up more startups, 5 years of the investments and the amounts of 2023. So when we look at the market, that the foreign capital component is of 80%, which brings us to a very high level of sensitivity to what is happening here in Israel, the lack of certainty, wars, and etc. So a lot of different indications that show us that we're actually on a retard and we're not moving forward. So we do have to look at what are we doing, in fact, and when we did. We did see that a decade ago, 60% of all the investments in Israel were in ICT and in topics of software, in fact. But the decade into the future, this year or next year, 75% of the investments were focused on the world of software as well. So we look at number of unicorns that emerged in Israel, majority of them from the world of software. And if I look at this macroeconomical tier, that did bring us to those numbers of exports, the number of workers, and etc. But it also constitutes risk, in fact, risk in the strategic sense in two aspects. First of all, too many eggs in one basket. So we work on software, fintech, cyber and organizational services. And one can also say that this focus, from one hand, brings us to high level of expertise, which is good focus, really, in fact. But from the other hand, technology comes in waves, and this particular wave of software of type I described right now, and naturally, at a certain point, will start to dwindle, and another wave will arrive, and the challenge is that the humanity is facing, and we need to face those challenges. So when we look at the strategic level, what kind of problems the world is coping with? Problems of aging, problems of health, budgets, significant budgets of national budgets of all countries are paying to health, food, scarcity of water, so many challenges, and software will not solve those challenges, neither in Israel or ever in the world, or not on its own at least. So therefore, when I did touch two of those levels of strategy and a macroeconomical one in the Israeli context, somehow it should actually be brought together, and that's what I want to say. This is why our strategy in the Innovation Authority has been adapted, and we want to go to deep tech. Deep tech, our software that we're so powerful in, and high tech, together with additional realms, such as, for example, biology, or other disciplines that are connected to sciences or deep sciences, and they will allow and they will facilitate, well, some call it the hair salon narrative, but 3 different points. Diversity of Israeli high tech, not just software, for all the reasons I mentioned before. Secondly, rooting or anchoring of companies in Israel. How do you anchor a company in Israel? It requires science, a significant amount of people that understand in depth the technology, and it's difficult to move it from Israel. It requires infrastructure that will be hard to find elsewhere in the world, and it will anchor you in Israel again. It requires manufacturing lines that will be sophisticated one that will be difficult to copy into other country. I don't have time to show you examples, but obviously those things will anchor you in Israel. And last part of this hair salon narrative, we talk about diversity, we talk about anchoring or rooting. And the third matter is removal barriers. And here, this is the role of the government. And the government has to do that. Removal of barriers, not to step in and to stand in the way, but to actually allow red carpets for investors and entrepreneurs, to open those barriers on the level of in-country and our cooperation with foreign entities, and we know how to do that with our partners abroad. Those matters are core of the strategy of our Authority of Innovation through a very diverse set of tools I have, but I don't have time to detail. I will get back to you, but Dov, just a second. I know that deep tech turned you on, really, so we'll get back to you. But you said barriers, and that really what caught my attention. Can you give me an example of a barrier to just ahead of really? What do you think we need as an authority to kick the way of the various entrepreneurs? Authority and budget-wise, what can you remove from the way of those people that need your help? Barriers, immediately when you talk about barriers, there's a regulation that comes up. And regulation, at the end of the day, can be not just a matter that is not disturbing if you properly build it, but it can be something very actually levering. Can be a leverage, unfair advantage through Israel regulator that helps Israeli companies to actually flourish. I think, for example, this is a barrier that you can not just remove, but to use. I'll give an example so it won't just stay hung in the air. For example, we are the authority, together with many partners in ministries and other entities. We created the Drone Entrepreneur Project. There is a regulator. The civic authority, there are drones and they control and command positions. And now the question how Israel can take the regulation that was very conservative, by the way, in the most complicated country when it comes to the control, aerial control, you know that. The most complicated one in the world, yeah. So the drone, I have to say, people come and study this project, drone project from all over the world, because really you took this most dense aerial space in the world and you said, you know what, we'll just crush this topic and we'll create here and civil aviation that will be serving us. So what did we do? What was the magic? I know the magic are the people, but you will tell me what is the magic on your end. First of all, of course, we are not the government. So all the governmental entities find it easier. We're statutory independent entities, so it's easier for the ministers to work. We're not competing with them, definitely not for the credit, which is maybe the most important thing for them. The second point that allowed the success of this project in the end, when you talk to someone who is a regulator, they have responsibility. The civic authority has the responsibility for our territory, and when you talk to them on the very natural level, we give them different advisors and consultants so they will understand the technology, what kind of opportunities it have, and what are the risks of the technology. So the Civic Aviation Authority learns from us. You talk to companies that are related to this matter. If you'll work with the regulator, we will fund your work with the regulator, talking about the tools we have as the Innovation Authority. So we create some kind of a round table where everyone is equal, the companies, the regulator, and ourselves, and we actually just bring the money to the table. And around this round table, we can talk business, really, cutting to the chase, and this cutting to the chase brought us to the point where we are approve the regulation. In the world of drones, it's maybe the most advanced one because every day things are changing, but we already flew drones to very lengthy distances, heavy weight, medium weight, and it's approved by the Civic Aviation Authority already. And it's a change of reality. It's a game changer when it comes to regulation. This is one barrier. I have a long list of barriers were removed, but maybe that was an example that really touched me. And it's a shame that in the defense from the drones, absurdly speaking, we are actually obviously very on a retreat. We have the shelf technology, but deep tech.
I would like to say two things. First of all, the Innovation Authority is an incredible place, an incredible unit. Thank you very much, and I'm proud. You know, I had a small part to play, but it's become an authority, and it didn't remain what it used to be as part of the economics ministry or the Ministry of the Economy. I wasn't there, I think, and I would say that you shouldn't downplay your role here. Look, but that's when Bennett was the Minister of Agriculture. It's not trivial when a minister gives up certain powers, because turning a ministry into an authority means it's saying, I'm not going to intervene in what you're doing, I'm not bringing in my own people, and so on. And if you look at what's going on, I hope that the authority continues being independent and that nobody comes without mentioning somebody like Amsalem, for instance, and saying, what were we elected for? In order to distribute the money to our people. So I hope that you remain an independent authority, and you're doing incredible, wonderful work, even though almost all of the companies don't use them, and that's fine. You have to help the weaker players there, but I think that the State of Israel, did that Startup Nation, the incredible success. I don't love that name. I think that Entrepreneurship Nation is a better moniker. It's more about software and cyber now. The word of, is dynamic, and technology is dynamic, and I fully believe that these highlights of software and SaaA, software as a service and applications, cyber and fintech, those things have reached a certain peak, and they're not going to decline to zero, but they're going to remain at their steady state. There isn't too much innovation there still. There's 600 cyber companies in Israel. What more can you come up with? Thank you very much for all those little gadgets and look, it's over. There is innovation that ends. There are typewriters. When if you would give it if you would hit it on the side, it would go to the back, and then they would change the space character. But eventually, they came up with a microprocessor that caused everybody to throw out their typewriters. So we're not going to throw those things out, but innovation will be in biology and in chemistry and in materials, in medicine, which is where we're totally lagging, which I have a certain medication I advanced here. If you look at it, you see, that our medical technology is so lagging behind. It's really lagging behind. If I could give you some example, the women here, first of all, would faint if they heard what was going on. If you understand what types of things, what kind of nonsense they're feeding you in the world of medicine. I think that's here when the Innovation Authority, and I saw this recently, totally changes their direction and says that our focus is deep tech. And deep tech is not the cyber deep tech, it's rather materials. It's about materials and the real tough stuff. I think that it's great. I think it's wonderful. And that brings me to the third thing, because, I understand I'm running out of time. If I've sounded pessimistic, that's just how I sound. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm really an optimist. That title of VC, it's a little bit of an offense, but I've taken that offense not to heart. I'm not a VC. I'm still an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs are ridiculously optimistic. And I'm like that. I'm that kind of a person. I believe that ultimately things will go well. Great. So let's go on from here to the last question. By the way, the story of medicine here, I had a long discussion here with Molly regarding medicine and what women are being fed. So you didn't listen to me, but you'll talk to them in a moment. But really, there are many fields where there is room for breakthroughs. We had Ariel Ron, the head of the State Space Authority, was here and said, in order to do space, you have to do the really tough stuff. You need material sciences and physics and things like that. And that's where we really need to make progress. But let's take that point of optimism that you mentioned. We'll take that. We'll do a round of comments, Tzachi, Ariel, and in the current situation with the war and with the current government, with what we have right now, give me one thing that we can get up and do tomorrow morning differently so that things will be a little bit better here and so that we can ensure a future a little bit more when it comes to technology. Here, this is in the previous panel. I gave people the theory of policy. Now I'm giving you, no, I'm saying that use what we have right now. Give us one thing that can perhaps give us a twist in the plot. Even if it's a little twist, that's good too. My boss, Dror Bean, the director of the Innovation Authority, is right now participating in panels in Davos in the World Economic Forum. And he is representing Israeli high-tech. To answer your question, I'll just quote what I heard in the Knesset committees in recent weeks, the committees on science and technology, the committees that deal with the economy and high-tech people, whether that's investors, entrepreneurs, CEOs, or whatever. And in the Knesset, I think this is what all of the committees there share in common. I would ask the government to really recruit, to come on board and start to do high-tech. It's not just Dora being myself or specific individuals that think that this is an important thing. I would like the government and a few people said this here in the previous panel as well, regardless of which government it is. I want the government to come and say that high-tech is important. It's here to stay. We will deliver. Look at our achievements. Then this is nothing compared to where we'll end up in. It will be permanent. Every multi-year will continue to grow. When people in the government broadcast this all over the world, then we'll be in a better place. Okay, Dov. What was the question? Give us something little that we can do right now. It doesn't have to be little, but something with the current state of situation. The answer is change the government. That's it. Okay. Ariel. Here you're giving me a chance. I don't know if you meant to do so, but you've kind of set yourself up for this. The short answer is to really adopt the national strategy for technology. So I'd be happy if you read this. It's really not that many pages. It's really quite an experience. It's in Hebrew. You can read it. There's also an English copy. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for those fantastic answers regarding optimism, optimistic spirits. Spirit, thank you very much. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you. Thank you very much to the panelists, and I would like to call up Asaf Arion, the Brigadier General Asaf Arion, for some concluding remarks. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, with regard to China, people tend to say that the number, Yoshua, here I'm speaking to your heart. With regard to China, people say that the ratio between the number of Sun Tzu quotes and the trustworthiness of the presentation is inverse. But there's at least one that we can use. Ultimately, know yourself and know the other. There is a type of journey of looking above the superpowers. Look at what that field looks like, that technological field in the world. Basically, what does the technological map of the world look like? It was once Brava and that divided into political, economic, and so on. We need another dimension for what the technology map looks like. I think that Israel is disproportionately large compared to its size. I think that Taiwan is also a country like that. Therefore, you need to look at the geotechnology map, if I can put it that way, and what the continents are that are in this map. what is the right way for Israel to navigate within this geotechnological map? And just like I think people said here, what is the right thing for Israel to do? This is the people, the science, the technology, the industry in a world where competition is getting stronger and stronger. For those who've been around and dealt with Israeli policy, you hear quite a bit the story of that we're going to walk, we're kind of walk between the drops. In the biography, I recommend you to read this, to walk between the giants, or to walk among the giants is the idea. That's an important article to read. Are we doing that? Or have we understood where we are in life? What can't we believe in terms of our regime, our values, and our technology, and our strategy, and that we're taking a clear standpoint. There's tension here that came up in the fantastic panels that we had here between free private enterprise and government intervention that seems more harmful than good, but it's needed in certain parts because there are certain things that only a state can do. And Ariel is a big proponent of that transition between software and hardware, or intellectual property and materials. The declaration was mentioned here. The Jerusalem Declaration, I believe, in 2022, when Biden visited here on the 13th of July, when the United States and Israel decided to establish a strategic dialogue on advanced technologies. And I have to admit here that this is a disclosure of mine. We were part of that team that put this together with partners in Israel and in the United States. And just like in the Shiloh tunnel, we managed to dig the tunnel from both ends and reach that point of convergence, and basically transition from experimentation and Israel or prohibition and what Israel can't do with China, and we went from there to a strategic partnership. Now, the subject of how you bring this type of a long-term serious subject like this, how do you bring this to Israel during a political and government crisis? And this is a long-term thing. It's been going on for years, of course, and also in the middle of a war. And we can give you the simple answers that were given. Some of them are unavoidable. Of course, it's political as well, but the government or the current war, as Clausewitz said, is the continuation of politics using other means. And that's really the situation. We understand at the Glazer Center, we understand that China is a major shaper. It's a technological powerhouse that's shaping the global security environment. We deal deeply with questions of where China is taking its technologies, and no less importantly, where is China taking its technologies from? We are exerting efforts in research, formulating policy recommendations regarding influence and how China influences its environment, how it transfers technology, and how it does its cyber efforts. The combination of efforts that was talked about here earlier, the academia, all of academia, industry, and government, here we expect to, with the people sitting in this room, and we expect to advance this with the people in this room and with others. Ultimately, Dov said that he's optimistic. Zionism, in its essence, is an optimistic enterprise. Think about its inception. The conditions weren't so great, but still, we needed a lot of positive spirit. I'm a third generation to pioneers here. Ultimately, you need to take that optimism and do what we can do with it. So it's an interesting day for me. I began with a sunrise in Tel Azeka with a new group of fighters in 8200, really, and these are really intel people with rifles. It says something about the connection between security and technology and its implementation. And I would like to end off with the best wishes for peace and for the hostages and for them to come back to their homes and families, for safety for our soldiers, and a speedy recovery to our wounded. Thank you very much and good luck. And the last thing I had to say is that there is a stand outside in English and in Hebrew.